I stared at my phone, the Instagram photo burning into my retinas. There was my husband, Mark, his arm draped around his young secretary's waist, both of them beaming at some rooftop bar I'd never seen before. The caption read, "Perfect evening with my love, blessed." The post disappeared seconds later, but the damage was done. My name is Bonnie, and until that moment, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Did you see it? My sister Grace's voice crackled through my phone. I took a screenshot. I saw it. My voice sounded hollow, even to myself. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the art history books I'd spent years collecting. The same books Mark always called my expensive hobby. What are you going to do? Wait for him to come home and lie to my face, apparently. I glanced at the clock. 7:43 p.m. He's probably deleting evidence right now. Mark walked through the door at 8:15, loosening his tie with practiced ease. "Hey, honey, sorry I'm late. Board meeting ran long." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been pretending to work. Really? The rooftop bar must have terrible Wi-Fi for business meetings. His face dropped for a fraction of a second before recovering. What? Emma's Instagram post. Nice sunset backdrop, by the way. Bonnie, I can explain. Don't. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. How long? He ran his hands through his salt and pepper hair, the same gesture that made me fall for him 12 years ago. It just happened. That's not what I asked. 6 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. 6 months of lies. 6 months of late nights at the office. 6 months of me believing his excuses. "I want a divorce," he said quietly. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Of course you do. Let me guess. Emma's pregnant?" His silence was answer enough. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Lana at our favorite coffee shop, stirring my untouched latte. "He's giving her everything I wanted," I said. "The house in the suburbs, the baby, the family dog." Lana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "He's an idiot who doesn't deserve you." 15 years, Lana. 15 years of supporting his dreams, hosting his business dinners, playing the perfect wife while he kept pushing off having children because the timing wasn't right. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Bonnie?" A young woman's voice. Familiar. My stomach clenched. "Emma?" Lana's eyes widened. "Please don't hang up," Emma said quickly. "I need to talk to you about something important. I think you've said enough." "It's about Mark. He's looking for a nanny." I almost dropped my phone. "Excuse me?" "For the baby. He says we need someone trustworthy, educated, good with children. Someone who understands art and culture." She paused. "He wants to hire you." The coffee shop seemed to tilt sideways. "Are you serious?" "He doesn't know I'm calling, but he's been talking about it for days. He says you're the perfect choice. You have the credentials, you know our social circle, and you're available." Lana was frantically mouthing, "What's happening?" across the table. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice eerily calm. "My ex-husband wants to hire me to take care of his love child with his former secretary?" "I know how it sounds," Emma said, "but there's more you need to know. Things about Mark that I've discovered. I'm scared, Bonnie." Something in her voice made me pause. "Scared of what?" "I can't say over the phone, but if you take this job, I can show you everything." I looked at Lana, who was still watching me with concern. My mind raced with possibilities, with revenge. "Tell Mark to call me," I heard myself say. "I'll consider it." After hanging up, I told Lana everything. She shook her head in disbelief. "You can't seriously be thinking about taking this job." I took my first sip of coffee, now cold. "Remember when Mark told everyone at his company Christmas party that my art history degree was cute, but not a real career?" Of course, I wanted to punch him. He always thought I was naive, harmless. I smiled, and it felt dangerous. Maybe it's time to prove him right. Bonnie. Think about it, Lana. He's inviting me into his home, his life, his secrets. My phone buzzed again, Mark's number this time. And he's going to pay me to be there. I let it ring once more before answering, my voice honey-sweet. "Hello, Mark. Emma tells me you have a proposition for me." "Your old room is still available in the guest wing," Mark said, leading me through the house I'd helped decorate. "Emma thought you might be more comfortable there." I clutched my bag tighter, noting the subtle changes. New curtains, different throw pillows, Emma's family photos replacing mine. The baby's due date was circled in red on the kitchen calendar, 3 weeks away. "How thoughtful," I replied, my smile perfectly practiced. Emma appeared in the doorway, her pregnant belly prominent under a flowing dress. "Bonnie, thank you for coming. I've made tea if you'd like some." The three of us sat in the kitchen, my kitchen, once, in awkward silence. Emma poured tea into delicate cups I'd bought in Paris years ago. "So," Mark cleared his throat, "we should discuss expectations." "Of course." I took a careful sip. "Though I admit, I'm curious why you thought of me for this position." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "You're qualified, discreet, and understand our social circle. Plus, you've always wanted children." The cup clinked sharply against its saucer as I set it down. Emma shot Mark a warning look. "What my husband means," she interjected, "is that we trust you. Despite everything." "How convenient." I kept my voice neutral. "And what exactly would my duties entail?" Mark launched into a detailed schedule of feeding times, developmental activities, and social engagements. I nodded along, but my attention caught on the stack of mail by his elbow. Past due notices from multiple banks. "Will I be attending the Thompson Charity Gala next month?" I asked innocently. "I heard you're one of the main sponsors again this year." Mark's jaw tightened. "We're reconsidering our social commitments." "Interesting." Later that afternoon, Emma showed me to my room. The moment Mark's footsteps faded, her composed facade cracked. "I need to show you something," she whispered, pulling a folder from her sweater. "But you can't tell Mark." Inside were bank statements, loan applications, and what looked like bookie receipts. "What am I looking at?" "Evidence." Emma's hands trembled. "Mark's been gambling, heavy betting on everything. Stocks, sports, real estate. He's losing millions." "Does anyone else know?" She shook her head. "He's been hiding it, taking out loans under shell companies. But it's getting worse. Last week I overheard him begging someone named Charles for more time." My phone buzzed, a text from Lana. "You okay in there?" "I'm fine," I typed back. "But you won't believe what I just found out." Emma touched my arm. "I'm sorry about us, how everything happened. I didn't know he was married when we started. By the time I found out, I was already trapped," I suggested. She nodded, tears welling up. "I thought he loved me. Now I realize I was just convenient, young, naive. Like I was 15 years ago." I studied her face, really looked at her for the first time. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need help, and because you deserve to know the truth about the man who hurt you." She pressed the folder into my hands. "Keep it somewhere safe." That evening, I sat in my old room, examining the documents more closely. Mark had lost over $4 million in the past year alone. His company was hemorrhaging money to cover his debts. A knock at my door made me jump. Mark stood there, looking uncertain. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Settling in?" "Perfectly." I slipped the folder under my pillow. "Just like old times." He lingered in the doorway. "Listen, Bonnie, I know this is unusual, but I really do trust you with this, with everything." I met his gaze. "Everything?" "Yes." He smiled, that same charming smile that once made my heart race. "You always were the sensible one, the stable one." "The boring one?" I couldn't resist. His smile faltered. "I never said that." Not to my face. Tension crackled between us. Finally, he sighed. "Get some rest. Emma has a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. You'll need to drive her." After he left, I pulled out my phone and called Grace. "You won't believe what I just discovered," I whispered. "Are you sure you should be doing this?" my sister asked. "Living in that house, playing happy families?" I glanced at the folder. "Trust me, it'll be worth it. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of burning everyone involved. I'm not looking for revenge, I lied. I'm looking for justice. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the familiar creaks of my old home, I wondered if there was really a difference. Outside my window, I could see Mark in his office, hunched over his computer, probably placing another bet or begging another loan. I smiled in the darkness. He thought he was so clever, hiding his secrets. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one who had organized his files for years. I knew where all the bodies were buried, and now I had nothing left to lose. He did what? Lana nearly choked on her salad. We were having lunch at a quiet corner table in her office building's cafe, away from prying ears. Borrowed money from his daughter's college fund, I said, keeping my voice low. His first wife's daughter, the one he never talks about. That's disgusting. Lana pushed her plate away. How did you find out? Late night snooping. Mark still uses the same password for everything. Our old anniversary date. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. He's desperate, taking money from anywhere he can get it. And Emma has no idea about the college fund? She barely knows about his first daughter. He's got everyone convinced he's still the successful businessman with the perfect life. I stabbed at my untouched sandwich. Classic Mark. Speaking of Emma, how's that going? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Emma's text read, "Please come home, emergency." I found Emma in the master bathroom, crying on the floor. Pregnancy test boxes littered the counter. What's wrong? I'm spotting, she whispered. And Mark's not answering his phone. I helped her up. I'm taking you to the hospital. No, Mark hates hospitals. He'll be angry if I go without telling him. Something in her voice made me pause. Emma, has he ever hurt you? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Not physically, he just gets angry sometimes. Throws things, says things. Like what? That I'm stupid, worthless, that I trapped him with this baby. She touched her belly protectively. Sometimes I think he's right. I felt a familiar chill. The same words, different decade. We're going to the hospital. Now. At the emergency room while Emma was being examined, I finally got through to Mark. Where the hell are you? I hissed. In a meeting. What's so urgent? Your wife is in the hospital, terrified about losing your baby, and you're in a meeting? I heard muffled casino sounds in the background. Or are you at Golden Sands again? Silence. Then, how do you know about Golden Sands? I know everything, Mark. Now get your ass to Memorial Hospital before I start making phone calls you won't like. He arrived 30 minutes later, disheveled and smelling of cigarettes. The doctor had already assured us everything was fine, just normal pregnancy concerns. Baby's okay? He asked, not meeting either of our eyes. Emma nodded, still pale. False alarm. Good. I have another meeting. Sit down, I commanded. He sat, surprised by my tone. Your wife needs you. Your child needs you. Whatever game you're playing can wait. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I slipped into Mark's home office. His computer was still on, email open. Subject line. Final notice, payment required. I forwarded everything to my secure email before carefully returning everything to its exact position. As I turned to leave, a thick manila envelope caught my eye, partially hidden behind some books. Inside was a contract with Charles's signature and clear evidence of fraud. Find anything interesting? I jumped. Mark stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Just getting some water, I said smoothly. Wrong room. With my office lights on? Force of habit. I used to get your late-night water, remember? He stepped closer. You know, I've been thinking about how convenient it was that you agreed to this arrangement. You mean the arrangement where you hired your ex-wife to nanny for your pregnant mistress? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, very convenient. If you're planning something... You'll what, Mark? Fire me? Tell everyone I'm bitter and crazy? I moved past him. Good luck finding another nanny who'll keep your secrets. The threat hung between us. Finally, he stepped aside. Good night, Bonnie. Good night, Mark. Don't stay up too late gambling. His sharp intake of breath was all the confirmation I needed. In my room, I called Lana. You were right, I said. He's getting suspicious. Maybe you should get out now, she suggested. You have enough evidence. Not yet. There's something bigger here. That contract I found. Charles's signature looks forged. Bonnie, I'm fine. I can handle Mark. That's what you said 15 years ago, Lana reminded me, before he destroyed your self-worth and convinced you that his affairs were your fault. I'm not that person anymore. I pulled out the contract copy I'd secretly photographed. Besides, I'm not the only one he's screwed over. Time to make some calls. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the window. The scared, trusting woman who'd married Mark was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone dangerous. Tomorrow I'd call Charles. If Mark had forged his signature, his oldest friend deserved to know. Let the games begin. Charles's office felt like stepping into an old boys' club, all leather and mahogany. He studied the contract copies I'd brought, his face darkening. This isn't my signature, he said finally. I never signed this. I thought you should know. I sat back, watching his reaction. Mark's been using your name to secure loans. That son of a bitch. Charles ran a hand over his face. I trusted him. 20 years of friendship, and he forges my signature? There's more. I pulled out my phone, showing him the evidence I'd gathered. He's been embezzling from the company accounts to cover gambling debts, using your authorization codes. Charles stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. This could ruin me. The board would never believe I wasn't involved. Unless you help me expose him first. He stopped pacing. What exactly are you proposing? You have access to records I can't reach. Together we could... A knock interrupted us. Charles's assistant poked her head in. Mr. Walker is here to see you. My heart jumped. Charles looked at me in panic. The private exit, he whispered, pointing to a side door. Quick. I slipped out just as Mark's voice boomed through the main office. Hidden in the stairwell, I pressed my ear to the door. Charles, old friend. Mark's false cheer was obvious. We need to discuss the Thompson account. Funny you should mention that. I didn't stay to hear more. My phone was already buzzing, Grace calling. Where are you? She demanded when I answered. Emma's been trying to reach you. Shit. I'd forgotten about my morning duties. Is everything okay? She's in labor. I nearly dropped my phone. But she's not due for 2 weeks. Tell that to the baby. Get to the hospital. Now. The maternity ward was chaos when I arrived. Emma was crying, alone in her room. Where's Mark? I asked. They can't reach him. She grabbed my hand through another contraction. Please don't leave me. 6 hours later, I held my ex-husband's daughter while Emma slept. The baby was tiny, perfect, innocent of her father's sins. Beautiful, isn't she? I turned. Mark stood in the doorway, looking rumpled and smelling of alcohol. You missed the birth, I said coldly. Had a meeting. With Charles? I watched his face carefully. Or your bookie. His eyes narrowed. Careful, Bonnie. Or what? You'll fire me? Good luck explaining to Emma why her baby's nanny suddenly disappeared. I placed the sleeping infant in her bassinet. By the way, Charles sends his regards. The color drained from Mark's face. What did you do? Nothing yet, but maybe you should ask yourself who else knows about your creative accounting. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Charles. Board meeting tomorrow. Be ready. The next morning, Grace met me for coffee before heading to the hospital. You're playing with fire, she warned. Mark's dangerous when he's cornered. He's always been dangerous, I replied. I just didn't see it before. And now you're using his newborn daughter as leverage? I set my cup down hard. I'm protecting that baby. You didn't see Emma yesterday, terrified and alone while he was out gambling away their future. Just like he gambled away yours? This isn't about revenge anymore. I showed her the latest documents Charles had sent. Mark's stealing from everyone. Friends, family, even his own daughter's college fund. Someone has to stop him. And that someone has to be you? Yes. I stood up, gathering my things. Because I'm the only one who knows exactly what he's capable of. Back at the hospital, I found Emma feeding the baby. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Mark's been acting strange, she said, making calls, moving money around. He thinks I'm sleeping, but I hear him at night. He's probably just stressed about the baby. No, she shook her head. It's something else. This morning, he was yelling at someone named Charles about loyalty and betrayal. My phone buzzed again. Charles. Mark knows. Watch your back. As if on cue, Mark burst into the room. His eyes locked onto mine with pure hatred. Out, he snarled. You're fired. Emma clutched the baby closer. Mark, no. Stay out of this, Emma. He stepped toward me. I know what you've been doing, both of you. He glanced at Charles's name on my phone screen. Careful, Mark. I stood my ground. You really want to do this here? Now? He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. I made you. Everything you have is because of me. Let go of her. Emma's voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. Mark released me, seeming to remember where we were. This isn't over. No, I agreed, rubbing my arm. It's just beginning. After he stormed out, Emma started crying. What's happening? I took her hand, my mind racing. Mark was unraveling faster than expected. Tomorrow's board meeting couldn't come soon enough. Everything's going to be okay, I promised, watching the baby sleep peacefully. I won't let him hurt either of you. I just hoped I could keep that promise. The baby's cry pierced the tension-filled house at 3 a.m. I reached the nursery before Emma, finding Mark already there, staring down at his daughter with glassy eyes. Go back to bed, I said quietly. I've got this. You've got nothing. He swayed slightly. This is my house, my family. The smell of whiskey rolled off him in waves. I stepped between him and the crib. You're drunk. Leave. You think you're so clever, he slurred, turning Charles against me, digging through my files. The baby's cries grew louder. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her robe. Mark, please, she whispered. You'll wake the neighbors. Let them wake up. He kicked a stuffed animal across the room. Let everyone wake up. Let them see what a manipulative bitch my ex-wife is. I scooped up the crying infant, shielding her from his rage. Emma, take the baby to your room and lock the door. Don't you dare give orders in my house. Mark lunged forward, but his drunken state made him clumsy. He stumbled, catching himself on the changing table. Emma quickly took the baby and disappeared. I heard her door lock click. You're pathetic, I said, keeping my voice steady. The great Mark Walker, drunk and screaming at a baby. You ruined everything. He straightened up, his eyes dark. I had it all under control until you came back. Under control? I laughed. Is that what you call forging signatures? Stealing from your own daughter's college fund? His hand shot out, grabbing my throat. One word from me, and no museum in this country will hire you. I'll destroy you. Too late, I managed to choke out. The press already has everything. He released me, staggering back. What? Check your email, or better yet, check tomorrow's headlines. Right on cue, his phone buzzed. He fumbled it out, face draining of color as he read. Prominent CEO accused of fraud and embezzlement, I quoted. The morning editions should be interesting. You can't prove anything. Charles already confirmed everything to the reporters. Your bookie was surprisingly chatty, too, once I mentioned the SEC might be interested. A crash from downstairs made us both jump. Voices called out Mark's name. Police! The shout echoed up the stairwell. Mark Walker, we have a warrant. The look he gave me could have frozen hell. You called the cops? No. I smiled. Charles did. Everything happened fast after that. Police swarmed the house. Emma watched from her doorway, baby clutched to her chest, as they led Mark away in handcuffs. He was still shouting threats when they put him in the car. By dawn, the story was everywhere. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications from news alerts. You okay? Lana asked when I called her. Better than okay. I watched reporters gathering outside the house from my window. But it's not over yet. What do you mean? Mark's arrest is just the beginning. Wait until they dig deeper into his business partners. Emma found me in the kitchen later, making coffee for the detectives still taking statements. Did you know? She asked. When you took this job, did you know what he was doing? I suspected. I handed her a mug. But I didn't know how bad it was until I saw the evidence. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? She looked down at her sleeping daughter. No, I wouldn't have. She took a shaky breath. What happens now? Now? I pulled out a business card. You call this lawyer. She specializes in cases like yours. She'll help you protect yourself and the baby. And you? Emma asked. What will you do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Charles. Board meeting in an hour. Time to finish this. I'm going to make sure Mark can never hurt anyone else, I said, gathering my things. And then I'm going back to my real life. The art museum? Actually, I smiled. I just got offered a position curating a new exhibit. The Art of Deception, a study in financial fraud. Seems my recent experience made me uniquely qualified. Emma managed a small laugh. Will you still visit her? She nodded toward the baby. Of course. I touched the infant's tiny hand. She's innocent in all this. Besides, someone needs to teach her about art. As I drove to the board meeting, my sister Grace called. Just saw the news, she said. You really did it. We really did it, I corrected. I couldn't have managed without everyone's help. Was it worth it? Getting revenge? I thought about Mark's face as they led him away, about Emma's relief, about the baby who would now grow up without his toxic influence. This wasn't just revenge, I said. This was justice. The company's headquarters loomed ahead, swarming with press. Charles waited at the private entrance. Ready? He asked. I straightened my jacket, gripping my folder of evidence. Ready. Time to tell the board everything. The boardroom fell silent as I laid out the evidence. 12 pairs of eyes stared at the documents projected on the screen, proof of Mark's years of deception. As you can see, I pointed to a particularly damning spreadsheet. The money trail leads through multiple shell companies, all ultimately controlled by Mark. And you discovered all this while working as his nanny? A board member, Thompson, asked skeptically. No, I smiled. I discovered it while being his wife for 15 years. The nanny position just gave me access to the final pieces. Charles stood up. I can confirm everything Bonnie has presented. My signature was forged on multiple documents. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Phones began buzzing with news alerts. Stocks falling, someone announced. We're down 15% already. It'll get worse, I warned. The press has everything. They're just waiting for confirmation from the board before publishing the full story. Thompson loosened his tie. How much did he steal? At least 12 million, probably more. Jesus Christ. My phone buzzed. Emma calling. I stepped out to answer. They're searching the house, she said, her voice shaking. They found offshore account documents in his study. Are you and the baby okay? Yes, but, Bonnie, there's something else. They found letters from his first wife, the one before you. She tried to expose him years ago, but he threatened to take their daughter away. My hands turned cold. What happened to her? She died in a car accident. They said the brakes failed. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Charles appeared in the hallway. Bonnie, you need to see this. Back in the boardroom, a news report played on the screen. Mark's face filled it, speaking from what looked like an airport. These allegations are false, he declared. My ex-wife is a vindictive woman who never got over our divorce. She's fabricated evidence to destroy me, but the truth will come out. Turn it up, someone said. I've built this company from nothing, Mark continued. I've created jobs, supported charities. Ask yourself who benefits from these lies. A bitter ex-wife and a jealous business partner who... The feed cut off. Breaking news banner. CEO Mark Walker arrested attempting to flee country. My phone exploded with messages. Lana, are you watching this? Grace, OMG, turn on the news. Emma, police are back with more questions. Thompson cleared his throat. Well, I think we've seen enough. The board needs to discuss this privately. I gathered my things but paused at the door. One more thing. Check the Thompson Foundation accounts. Mark was a trustee there too. The color drained from Thompson's face. He grabbed his phone, dialing frantically. In the elevator, Charles turned to me. You knew about the foundation? I knew Mark never met a pot of money he didn't try to steal from. Outside, reporters swarmed us. Mrs. Walker, did you know about the fraud during your marriage? What about the allegations of previous victims? Comment on the arrest? I pushed through them to my car, where Lana waited. Need a getaway driver? She asked. God, yes. We drove in silence until reaching our favorite coffee shop. The same one where Emma had first called me about the nanny position. You're all over the news, Lana said, showing me her phone. They're calling you a hero. Wronged wife exposes corporate corruption. I don't feel like a hero. I stared into my coffee. I feel tired. But satisfied? Before I could answer, Emma called again. The police found something else, she said. Evidence about his first wife's accident. They're reopening the case. My hands shook as I set down my cup. He really is a monster, isn't he? Was, Emma corrected. Was a monster. You stopped him. After hanging up, I showed Lana the texts from Charles about the board's decision. Immediate termination. Full cooperation with authorities. Complete audit of all accounts. It's really over, Lana said. Not quite. I pulled out my laptop. I promised the museum an exhibit. The art of deception, remember? Seriously? After everything? Art tells stories, Lana. This one needs to be told. I opened a new document. About how money and power corrupt. About how victims become vigilantes. About how ex-wives make excellent spies? That too. I smiled, but it faded quickly. His first wife tried to stop him. She died trying to protect her daughter. But you succeeded, Lana squeezed my hand. You finished what she started. My phone buzzed again, Grace this time. Turn on the TV now. The coffee shop's television showed Mark in handcuffs, being led into the police station. The headline below read, CEO facing multiple charges, fraud, embezzlement, possible connection to cold case death. Your sister's calling, Lana nodded at my buzzing phone. Let it ring, I said, watching Mark's defeated face on the screen. I need a minute to just breathe. For the first time in months, I could. The gallery buzzed with opening night energy. My exhibit, The Art of Deception, had drawn quite a crowd, including several reporters and former board members. Is that really his signature? A woman peered at a framed document behind glass. It looks so real. That's what made him dangerous, I explained. Everything looked real on the surface. The exhibition mixed financial documents with classical art about betrayal. Judas kissing Jesus, Brutus stabbing Caesar. Each piece told part of the story. Brilliant concept, Charles said, appearing beside me with 2 champagne glasses. Though I'm not sure how I feel about my forged signature being called art. It tells a story. I accepted the champagne. Speaking of stories, have you seen today's paper? Mark's plea deal? Hard to miss. He shook his head. 20 years, plus the investigation into his first wife's death is gaining momentum. Mrs. Walker? A reporter approached, notebook ready. Could we get a quote about your ex-husband's plea bargain? Actually, I smiled. It's just Bonnie now. And no comment. Emma arrived later, pushing a stroller. The baby, now 3 months old, slept peacefully. Sorry we're late, she said. Someone didn't want a nap earlier. I'm glad you came. I peeked at the sleeping infant. How are you holding up? Better. The lawyer you recommended is amazing. She's helping me secure full custody and protect the baby's trust fund. Emma looked around the gallery. This is incredible, by the way. Turning everything into art, it's like taking back the narrative. Speaking of narratives, Grace joined us, waving her phone. You need to see this. She pulled up a video. Mark in his prison jumpsuit, being interviewed. "I want to apologize," he said, looking directly at the camera. "To my wives, my children, my colleagues, I betrayed everyone who trusted me." "Turn it off," I said. "Wait," Emma touched my arm. "Listen." "Bonnie," Mark continued, "if you're watching this, you were right, about everything. I destroyed what we had. I destroyed everything I touched." "Convenient timing," Charles muttered, right before his sentencing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Need to see you. Important. Mark." "He's trying to contact you?" Emma asked, reading over my shoulder. "Not just me." I showed them another message from his lawyer. "He's requesting meetings with everyone he hurt. Claims he wants to make amends." "Are you going?" Grace asked. Before I could answer, Thompson approached our group. "Remarkable exhibition," he said. "Though I admit, seeing my foundation's doctored accounts on display is unsettling." "That's the point," I replied. "Discomfort makes people pay attention." "Indeed." He cleared his throat. "The Foundation's board would like to commission you. We're planning an educational program about financial fraud awareness. Your unique perspective would be valuable." I caught Lana's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle thumbs up. "I'll consider it," I said. After Thompson left, Emma touched the glass covering one of Mark's forged documents. "Will you visit him?" she asked quietly. "Hear his apology?" "Would you?" She shook her head. "I'm done letting him manipulate me. The baby and I are starting fresh." Charles raised his glass. "To fresh starts. And to justice," Grace added. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. "Please, I need to explain." "Delete it," Lana said, appearing beside me. "He doesn't deserve closure." But something made me hesitate. Maybe I'm the one who needs closure. The gallery continued filling with people, all examining the evidence of Mark's deception transformed into art. Each piece told part of the story: the fake signatures, the doctored accounts, the web of lies. A young woman stopped in front of the centerpiece, a massive collage of newspaper headlines chronicling Mark's downfall. "Did you ever suspect," she asked me, "during your marriage?" "I suspected I wasn't seeing the whole picture," I replied. "I just didn't know how dark the hidden parts were." Later, as the crowd thinned, I found myself alone with Emma by the exhibition's final piece, a simple photograph of Mark's baby daughter sleeping peacefully. "Why this one?" Emma asked. "Why end with her?" "Because she represents hope," I said. "She'll grow up knowing the truth. No manipulation, no lies. Thanks to you." I shook my head. "Thanks to all of us. We all played a part in exposing him." My phone buzzed one final time. Mark again. "I'll be sentenced tomorrow. Last chance." Emma saw the message. "Whatever you decide, you've already won." I looked around the gallery, at the art, at the people, at the story I'd helped tell, at Emma and her daughter, free from Mark's influence, at Charles, rebuilding his reputation, at my sisters and friends who supported me through everything. "You're right," I said, deleting Mark's message without responding. "I have won." The baby stirred in her stroller, opening her eyes. They were clear and bright, untouched by deception, just like mine were now. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. I sat across from Mark, studying the man who'd once seemed so powerful. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. "You came," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I almost didn't. But you did." He attempted his old charming smile. It looked hollow now. "The exhibit is getting rave reviews. Art of deception. Clever. I'm not here to discuss my work." "Why are you here?" I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "To give you these?" Inside were photos. His first wife with their daughter, newspaper clippings about her accident, police reports recently unsealed. "They're reopening the case," I said. "Her daughter came forward with new evidence." His hands trembled slightly as he looked at the photos. "Don't," I cut him off. "Save your lies for your new lawyers." Is that why you really came? To tell me about the investigation? No, I leaned forward. I came to tell you that your daughter, your first daughter, is going to testify. She remembers things about the night her mother died, things she was too scared to tell before. The color drained from his face. She's not scared anymore, Mark. None of us are. A guard approached. Time's up. I stood, but Mark grabbed my wrist. Wait, please. I need to know. Did you take the nanny job planning all this? No. I gently removed his hand. I took it because Emma needed help. Everything else, I shrugged. That was just karma. Outside, Emma waited in her car. How was it? She asked as I got in. Surprisingly easy. I buckled my seatbelt, like watching a shadow disappear in sunlight. The detective called while you were in there. They want to interview me about the night Mark came home drunk, the day before his arrest. They think it shows pattern of behavior. Are you going to do it? She nodded, adjusting the rearview mirror to check on her sleeping baby. I'm done protecting him. My phone buzzed. A message from Grace. Museum board meeting in 30. You ready? Drop me at the museum, I asked Emma. They're reviewing my proposal for a permanent exhibition on financial crime and art. The Thompson Foundation is funding it, right? Among others. I smiled. Turns out there's a lot of interest in how art can expose corruption. At the museum, Lana waited outside. Charles called, she said as we walked in. The board approved your consultant position. Full autonomy, your own department. Good. I adjusted my blazer. Because I have plans. Care to share? Let's just say Mark wasn't the only one hiding behind fancy titles and forged documents. I pulled out my tablet, showing her a familiar signature. Remember Thompson's foundation? Turns out Mark learned his tricks somewhere. You're going after Thompson now? I'm going after anyone who abuses power and trust. I pushed open the boardroom doors. That's what art does. It reveals truth. Thompson sat at the head of the table, smiling benignly. He had no idea what was coming. Later that evening, I met Grace and Emma for dinner. The baby cooed in her high chair, reaching for my necklace. She's getting so big, Grace observed. And strong, Emma added, like her Aunt Bonnie. My phone lit up with a news alert. Investigation into CEO's death reopens. Former wife's testimony key evidence. They're really doing it, Emma said, reading over my shoulder. They're going to solve her murder. Justice takes time, I replied. But it always comes. Grace raised her glass. To justice. To truth, Emma added. To art, I finished, watching the baby grab her mother's keys, jangling them triumphantly. The setting sun painted the restaurant windows golden, reminding me of that Instagram post that started everything. Mark and Emma at the rooftop bar, their false happiness frozen in filtered perfection. Now the truth was unfiltered, raw, beautiful in its own way. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Mark's first daughter. Thank you for helping me find my voice. I showed the message to Emma and Grace. You did that, Grace said. You gave everyone their voice back. No. I reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand. We did it together. That's the real art. Turning pain into power, secrets into strength. Speaking of strength, Emma smiled. Guess who's been approved for a small business loan? I'm opening my own accounting firm. Specializing in fraud detection, of course. We laughed. A real free sound that made the baby giggle along. Outside, the city lights began twinkling on. Somewhere in a prison cell, Mark faced his demons alone. Somewhere in a boardroom, Thompson's carefully constructed world was about to unravel. But here, in this moment, with my chosen family around me, I was exactly where I needed to be. The truth, like art, had set us all free.